Hey there, everyone. That sexy nerd is back again. And we're continuing with Cleopatra Extra History. So, not much to say here in the beginning. We're here at the Ides of March. And if you're a history buff like me, you know what that means. That means there's a lot of stabbing that's going to go around, and Julius Caesar is going to be the pincushion. Yeah. So, y'all know what's going to happen, but what happens after Cleopatra flees Egypt? I always saw what happened in the 1999 movie, but how did it feel in real history? So, let's find out together. So please smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe if you think I deserve it. And let's do this thing, y'all.
Rome, March 15th, 44 BCE. Cleopatra is riding high. She's 25 years old, wealthy, 25? Powerful. She's got Julius Caesar wrapped around her finger and a son with him, Caesarion, who will confirm Cleopatra's connection.
Oh my God, did you guys ever see that movie, the show Rome? They tried to say that his son was illegitimate just by getting impregnated by one of the other characters in the show. It's just made everything so awkward. I'm like, I don't know why we had to scandalize Rome even more. Rome was pretty damn scandalous regardless of anything you made up.
To Rome and establish her line of succession in Egypt. Oh yeah, she's bet big on Caesar. Typically, when talking about Roman history, we tend to focus on the ways that Rome influenced the world beyond its borders. We look at the lineage of generals, senators, and eventually emperors. But as we know, history is way more complicated than that. And the stories of empires, even powerful empires like Rome, are never so one-sided. The ruled can have just as much influence on the course of history as the rulers. And such was the case with Cleopatra and Rome. By the time Cleopatra came into the picture, Caesar had already crossed the Rubicon and defied the Roman Senate by bringing troops into the capital. He'd started and won a civil war. Yet, Caesar didn't make his turn toward dictatorship until after he fell in with Cleopatra. Okay, consider this. After meeting Cleopatra in 48 BCE, Caesar took on the role of dictator for 10 years and erected a statue of himself in a prominent temple reserved only for deities. Then, on the advice of Cleopatra's astronomer, he reformed Rome's lunar calendar to match the Ptolemaic solar calendar, the one that most of the world uses today. These were more than simple power grabs. It was a move that seemed inspired by Cleopatra and his time in Egypt. By moving to show himself as a god and seize control of the calendar, a role reserved for Roman priests, he was fashioning himself into a god emperor, a pharaoh, a leader who controlled both power and time. Now, there had already been animosity towards Caesar due to the whole civil war thing, but these moves towards deification were impossible for Roman leaders to bear. And the presence of Cleopatra in Rome definitely added fuel to that fire. Yeah. There were even rumors that Caesar planned to legitimize Caesarion and move the capital of the empire to Alexandria. What? Not only was Caesar a dictator in the making, some whispered, he was becoming un-Roman under the influence of this foreign queen. So, on March 15th, 44 BCE, a cabal of Roman senators assassinated Caesar on the Senate floor. After the killing, Cleopatra made a hasty retreat back to Alexandria. Although Caesar's death represented a setback, Cleopatra didn't miss a beat. In the classic Ptolemaic fashion, she used the crisis as a cover for some traditional familial slang. Because she knew that in the confusion following Caesar's murder, no one in Rome would bother her about a little fratricide. So upon returning to Egypt, she orchestrated the poisoning of her new husband, Ptolemy XIV, and then elevated her son to serve as her new co-ruler, though since Caesarion was still a baby, everyone pretty much knew who was in charge. Plus,
I feel like that's not legal, but they're like, whatever, right?
Plus, because Caesarion was her baby, she wouldn't have to worry about him trying to assassinate her for quite a while. But while things were surprisingly chill in Egypt after the Egyptian murder, things were decidedly not chill after the Roman one in Rome. Following Caesar's assassination, a new civil war broke out, with Caesar's killers on one side and Caesar's friends on the other. The latter group included Caesar's right-hand man, Mark Antony, and Caesar's 19-year-old grandnephew, adopted son, and heir, Octavian. Octavian quickly showed a political cunning that Caesar himself had lacked. He took on Caesar's name, adopted his habit of referring to himself in the third person, classic power move, and most importantly, continued to support his granduncle's efforts to be deified. Because you see, by pushing Rome to see Julius Caesar as a god, Octavian would then be the son of a god. Clever boy.
Clever boy.
But there was friction among Caesar's friends.
Was that a Jurassic Park reference?
Clever girl.
Cute.
Mark Antony, a successful general and politician in his own right, despised Octavian. He felt that he was the rightful, stronger, and more logical successor to Caesar. Yet, Antony temporarily put that all aside and worked with Octavian to take out Caesar's murderers. By 42 BCE, Antony and Octavian were triumphant, and the leaders of the opposition committed suicide. When they emerged the victors, Antony and Octavian formed a three-member governing body with a guy named Lepidus. And one of their first acts was to officially recognize both Cleopatra's rule over Egypt and Caesarion as co-ruler. Though, while things might look more stable, the peace was of course a front.
Yeah.
This three-man council was really a two-man showdown, with Lepidus sidelined. Antony and Octavian were spoiling for a fight, and both leaders worried over Cleopatra's allegiance. Probably because during the Civil War, she tried to placate both sides. But while she was currently stable in Egypt, Cleopatra knew that she needed close ties to Rome in order to fend off foreign invaders or rivals to her throne. So which horse would she finally back? Octavian was not suitable for a number of reasons, chiefly among them because Cleopatra wanted to promote Caesarion as Caesar's true heir, and Octavian represented a competing claim to that legacy. That's not to say she wanted to put her son on a throne in Rome, but that a direct connection to Caesar granted a lot of powerful influence in both Rome and Egypt. And remember, Caesar had been made a god, and if both parents were gods, you get the gist. I mean, I won't do the math for you because do you square godhood or do you just add it together? Doesn't matter. Antony, on the other hand, was a seasoned general commanding a powerful army who was also middle-aged, probably into extramarital affairs, and interested in long-distance relationships. Yeah, not a hard choice here. So Cleopatra now placed her chips on Mark Antony. Antony was installing himself as the protector of Rome's eastern provinces when he summoned Cleopatra to meet him in Anatolia. The purpose of this meeting was for Antony to take stock of Cleopatra as a supporter of Rome, but Cleopatra was aiming higher. As in her meeting with Caesar, she knew this first impression could make or break both Egypt and the future of her dynasty. She needed it to be unforgettable. Tarsus, Anatolia, 41 BCE. Cleopatra's royal ship pulls into the river, a palace floating on the waves. Imperial purple sails carry it in, its stern covered in gold, and the rowers hauling on silver-coated oars keep rhythm with flutes and lyres rather than drums. And on deck, visible from shore, lay Cleopatra, arranged on a bed of pillows under a golden canopy, dressed as a goddess. Her most beautiful male and female servants stood by, gently fanning their queen while dispersing sweet-smelling incense that can be smelled from the riverbanks. Then, she sends a dinner invitation to Antony's reception committee. Forget me coming to you. You come to me. Cleopatra's entrance and the public's reception to it completely upstaged Antony's modest welcoming committee. So he was left with no choice but to give in to her request and dine aboard her ship. He may have called the meeting, but she was in charge now. And what followed was the first of many gaudy Antony and Cleopatra banquets. They dined on settings adorned with jewels, surrounded by gold and silver decorations, as rose petals a foot deep cushioned the floor. It was here in Tarsus that Antony and Cleopatra cemented their personal and political relationship, a relationship that looked promising for both parties. As part of their political alliance, Cleopatra agreed to provide Antony with supplies for an upcoming border campaign and, of course, for any potential civil war that may break out in a couple of years. You know, just in case. And Antony, for his part, sent assassins to kill Cleopatra's exiled sister, who represented the last realistic Ptolemaic threat to Cleopatra's rule.
Wow.
Their personal lives, too, seemed like a good fit. Antony, already associated with partying and carousing in Rome, was a natural partner for Cleopatra's lifestyle in Egypt. And while their alliance may have been primarily political, Cleopatra was undoubtedly fond of Antony. In addition to her Egyptian pastimes, Cleopatra got involved in Antony's hobbies, like drinking, playing dice, drinking, hunting wild game, and when the mood struck, drinking. So basically, they went full-blown college relationship at this point, right down to the togas. The two publicly confirmed their romantic relationship the next year
Oh,
when
everybody had a
Cleopatra
toga.
gave birth to a twin boy and girl. Though in a slightly awkward situation, the birth occurred the same year as Antony married Octavian's sister, Octavia,
Oh,
a
really?
move designed to build a lasting peace between the two leaders.
That's
So
crazy.
Antony married
I always thought she was a little unreasonable in the movie why she got mad when he married her, but yeah, it makes a hell of a lot more sense when you know the truth, doesn't it? Because they never mentioned that part that she had kids with him. In that movie they only focus on her on cesarean. They don't even know that they had two other children, which is like, what the hell?
his co-ruler's sister, while maintaining a pretty public relationship with the Queen of Egypt.
Jeez.
Now, if Antony were purely politically motivated, he would have stayed at home with Octavia and kept Cleopatra in his DMs. But it was very
DMs.
clear he couldn't get Cleopatra and her lavish lifestyle out of his head. And by 37 BCE, he sent Octavia back to Rome and moved in with the Egyptian queen. They stayed together in Antioch while Antony prepared another Parthian campaign, and Octavia gave birth to Antony's child back home.
Really?
Ouch. While Antony campaigned in the east, Cleopatra gave birth to another child by Antony, a son, in 36 BCE.
Jeez.
So by 34
going
BCE,
hard.
Cleopatra is 35 years old, living in the
35.
most resplendent palace in the world, building a non-murdery family, and has the Mediterranean's greatest man at her feet. And they lived happily ever after,
yeah?
right? I mean, I watched like 2/3 of that Shakespeare play. We wrapping this one up early?
We all know what happens at the end of the story. We all know. But man, that's really interesting. Again, you learn something new every day. I didn't even know. I think I remember though that there's another Cleopatra after him, and she ended up being one of her kids, maybe. So yeah. So it really does make a lot of sense. But man, I really love this. I really love this whole gathering of information on this. I love how much of an interesting woman she was, especially back then. But you know, it's they should have made something like that in like Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones seems to be like the one show that like adapts real historical figures and fits them into their shows. And I swear, a lot of like I even say that the Mad King is based off of Caligula. Everybody's saying it's Charles the Mad or Charles the Sixth of France, but I believe it's Caligula. There's way too many similarities to count. But that's a story for another day. So please smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe if you think I deserve it. And I'll see you all in the next video.